Hello everyone, my name is Shayna Butler and I'm recording today on my research proposal through Dr. Julie Burns' class of research methods, the proposal of trauma-informed mobile crisis teams in regards to the longevity of sobriety after rehabilitation treatment centers. So as you can see, I have my slides laid out very similar to my paper in regard to my proposal. You'll see an overview. We'll talk a little bit about literature review. We'll talk a little bit about sampling design and my framework, my methodology and my procedure, limitations, possibly some discussion on like what worked and what didn't, and then my final feelings and conclusion on my proposal. Embedded in this slide is a short video. It's 3 minutes long. It really talks about life, returning home from rehab. It talks about life and expectations and challenges and struggles after rehabilitation. But for some reason, it will play, but not while I'm recording, or I just can't figure it out. So I would encourage you to go back and look at it because it does give a great sense of that feeling alone, feeling overwhelmed, the struggles that come with it. So my overview in this and kind of talking about my abstract is the reason I really picked this topic is addiction holds a very key and crucial piece to my heart. I know many people that struggle with addiction and addiction services, and I've seen firsthand the lack of support or continued care for individuals after rehabilitation services, hand in hand with seeing first hand the recidivism, right, of people going right back into rehab. So 1 in every 3 people worldwide, they struggle with addiction. And out of that number, only 10% or just over 2 million are receiving treatment. So it's really important to remember that worldwide, these addiction services or addiction struggles are huge, but people really struggle with getting treatment. People that are in the foothold of addiction can easily identify like a singular or even numerous barriers that contribute to reluctance with addiction recovery, continued care services. It's a common understanding that you can recover, but on average, it takes about 4 or 5 episodes of going back into rehabilitation treatment after initial treatment. And that happens usually within the early stages. So I'm talking about like early sobriety, which is within the first year after rehabilitation. So if you really think about it, 4 to 5 episodes within that first year, people are really getting, extended trauma, extended experiences from these crisis situations, because addiction is a crisis situation. Recovery can really be broken down into 3 phases. I mentioned that just a second ago. So there's really the early phase of recovery, and that is literally the first year. It's always defined throughout multiple articles as the first year of recovery is considered early recovery. Then it's sustained recovery. Sustained recovery is a 1 to 3 year marker, and then there's stable recovery. Stable recovery is 5+ years of recovery and being able to maintain that recovery for an extended period of time. 85% of people after rehabilitation or some form of intervention from addiction or substance abuse recovery relapse within 1 year. That's a really high percentage. It can be from various things. It can be from the psychological cravings as it's diagnosed as a disease, and we'll get into that a little bit. It can be from stresses, social norms, anxiety, location, geographical location, numerous different things. Rehab has been shown that it demonstrates improvements, but it doesn't provide continued care. And we'll talk about that a little bit in why I want to do this later in some of my lit review and some of my methodology and procedures in my discussions. Continuing care is proven to yield better outcomes from 12 months to even 24 months, if you can sustain that continued care for somebody that's in recovery, it's great. You have to consider that these individuals coming out of rehab are vulnerable adults, and they're looking to reorient in regards to personal supports, relationships, communities, factors, and things like that. The aim of this study is to see if these trauma-informed care mobile crisis teams will improve the sobriety and end this consistency and cyclic attitude of relapse. And it provides these moments of insecure, they work the best in these moments of insecurities for people, and going through that. So my literature. My literature is quite extensive, actually. I know we had 14, but I definitely went and have quite a few articles. I broke down my literature into different coded events and 6 coded events per se in general. So I have addiction, I have mental health, I have rehabilitation, recovery, trauma-informed care, and mobile crisis teams. And in order to understand recovery in general and the importance of these continued care, you really have to understand all 6 components. So addiction really is broken down into a disease. It's physical and mental, and it's very newly defined as a disease, actually, in the 19th century. So it wasn't until then they really figured out that addiction is like brain circuits and genetics combined with environmental and life experiences, and is super complex and actually becomes a disease for individuals. With that and the newness of it, it also comes with multiple distortions of this. Not everybody believes that this is a disease, and not everybody can wrap their head around it because it's a very non-tangible diagnosis. Mental health, on the other hand, 25% of people addicted have a dual diagnosis of mental health issues as well. They have fundamental psychological tendencies and predetermined predecessors that compose the brain. And they get stuck in this substance shame cycle, which kind of erodes the connections within your brain and the connections to resources once you're done in dealing with the recovery piece of it. So this can cause psychological distress for people, and with mental health, they tend to really rely on others for supports. Depression, anxiety, social exclusion, loss of societal standings, loss of access to resources, disengagement. These can all be mental health factors that contribute to a relapse because they don't have the coping strategies. Rehabilitation centers, there's a wide variety of measures that happen in rehabilitation centers that assist the addict with recovery, but we need to really look at quality of care or quality of life when you're in these and how they implement this. So the World Health Organization defines a person's perception of life in the content of cultural and value systems in which they live and their goals, expectations, standards, and concerns. Embedded in this is continued care through a rehabilitation center. They preach it, they work the fundamentals of it, but then once that's removed, individuals are left to their own devices of trying to figure that out and maneuver those systems by themselves. So although rehabilitation facilities support this, life after doesn't support this. Recovery. So in recovery, we're really looking at recovery capital, both the quality and the quantity of your life. And this can be either positive or negative recovery capital. An addict's life can be founded on social capital, or this theory is founded on social capital, and can relate to resources available in order to sustain sobriety. So this piece really breaks people's lives down into 3 categories. So there's a personal, social, and a community recovery. And then negative recovery capital is that rock bottom approach. The more we looked into it, the more it's this idea of that this rock bottom approach promotes and motivates one for positive behavioral change. However, through the studies, we're seeing that that might not necessarily be the case, and that might actually traumatize an individual more. And this is where this recovery piece of the phases or stages, the year 1 to 3, and 5 really come into play. Then I looked into trauma-informed care. Trauma has been referred to as a public health epidemic, which I totally agree with. Trauma-informed care offers this sense of security and support, and it makes the first responders learn more about traumatic experiences. And how they're linked to your physical and mental outcomes, right? So trauma-informed care can work to be more effective sometimes than separate interventions. It creates this no wrong door approach, so everybody's journey becomes their own in how they serve it. Trauma awareness, self-care strategies for comparing combative vicarious traumatization. It offers two-way safety for the individual and the staff worker, and it promotes research. So trauma and care really promotes this idea of research and research methods for understanding and developing how we deal with people. And then finally, mobile crisis teams. They're great alternatives to emergency or medical services and law enforcement for low acuity calls. It can decrease situations related to mental health or substance abuse or concurrent like social needs and stuff like that. It really provides immediate mental and emotional support that focus on the overall theme of survival needs. So it can provide immediate links for people for additional support. All right, so the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration defines recovery as a process of change that helps people improve their health and wellness. Lives are self-directed lives and reach their full potential. So when we're talking about my framework and my sampling, I really looked at the 4 key concepts that SAMHSA identifies. So health, home, community, purpose. And I broke those down, understanding that those are really the 4 components that people in recovery tend to focus on. What relevant theories worked with that? So clearly cognitive behavioral therapy, that all these pieces together kind of merge and affect a person, as well as this in the later part of the research, this social learning theory. So once you have these trauma-informed care units, and these crisis teams, they focus on that social learning, teaching people through example how you can continue. I use non-probability sampling because I definitely had a very tight, controlled group. I knew I wanted it to become from identified agencies that focus on trauma-informed care. I have a smaller sampling group of 10 people, male and female, mixed gender, and I used a mixed methods approach combining qualitative and quantitative data, gathering personal experiences from people on top of surveys, on top of their casework and numbers and things like that. Using the mixed method approach just seemed a lot more feasible in order to study this. All right, so when we're talking about my methodology, as you can see, it's a little bit extensive. I'm going to give you the abridged version. So there's the initial identification. We talked about that a second ago. So it's within a 50-mile radius of each other. I really wanted to find 2 agencies so that we could offer our individuals that we were working with consistent factors that were applied on their life. So I really wanted to focus on this 50-mile radius because although it would be hard to identify, then we could really see, you know, a more set non-variable testing group. 10 multigendered respondents. They had to be within, they had to be sober for at least 3 months, and it had to be within 1 year from the date of them leaving a recovery or a rehabilitation center. They had to be within 20 to 40 years old so that their life and the factors within their health, personal wellness, life in general kind of ran congruent. And then they were divided into 2 separate groups. So group A were anonymously picked 5 respondents that would work with basic substance abuse care, focusing on addiction recovery, focusing on AA or NA, and you got your basic what you get now, right? Like your standard meal deal. And group B were 5 more people They got the meal deal, but they also got this access to this trauma-informed care mobile crisis team. So at any point throughout the time, they had to use it at least once a month, but they could access additional services. On that team, there was a psychiatrist or a psychologist, a social worker, and an addiction recovery person. So you got 3 people that were all specialized within their field. There was basic support needs, but also additional other pieces. We then took you had a meeting once a month, face to face with a person. And then we took all that under our processing and we questioned all these people regarding their personal health, their relationships, community, agencies, organizations, society, and policies. These agencies tracked attendance, the levels of support that people utilized, if they utilized more support. And then our group B, they were allowed to look at these things that they were tracking and go back and kind of help the individuals with it. And group A just got that basic need served. Interviews could have been face-to-face, they could have been site-based, but they did have to make like some sort of effort. And data at the end. So the validity and the reliability of this, measuring the effectiveness of this data collection and the interventions offered will be directly from the continued sobriety monitoring. So that's how we are finding out if this is actually working. They looked at numbers of people that took part, the longevity of sobriety through those first, compared group A to group B. They also utilized individuals with the resources within their locations and looked at that as well. So that data was all very, I would say, very decent level of validity. We presented really concise pieces to that. So reliability, of course, there could be different pieces that didn't present exactly the same. So there were limitations. Mobile crisis teams really focus on a geographical location and the individuals within that geographical location to be able to access these. So identifying individuals that were kind of spread out provided a little less consistency. Also the belief from an individual in mobile crisis teams. A lot of times during those moments of insecurities or crisis, people really struggle on calling for additional help. And so if you're not going to use a mobile crisis team to what they should be used for, it's a little hard. And then this piece too of like acceptance and recognition that you have this trauma. These can be a lot bigger services. Do I think this study could have gone on for a lot longer than a year? Absolutely. Because tracking people after year 1 to see, the sobriety and how it affects you into that sustained sobriety, the years 1 to 3, I definitely think causes a bit of limitation. So continuing care is a low intensity intervention. It follows influential and more intensive treatment episodes for substance and offers a means for promoting longevity. I do believe that. I believe that focusing on addiction and recovery as a stage plan with 3 different stages of recovery and recovery markers allow for those in recovery practice to provide sustained an education and cross-sectional analysis, understanding that life after rehabilitation can look very big and very broad for these individuals, and it can be a real struggle, and it can infringe on this level that they've had these supports, and then they're yanked away, and then we're asking them to do the same thing without giving them that transitional period.